The rain hammered against the windows of Rosie's diner like 1,000 impatient fingers, each drop racing the others down the streaked glass. Inside, the air hung thick with the smell of burnt coffee and yesterday's meatloaf, mingling with the sweet decay of maple syrup that had seeped into the vinyl booth cushions years ago. Maya Reeves moved between the tables with practiced efficiency, her worn sneakers squeaking against linoleum that had once been white but now bore the patina of decades. A map of stains that told stories she'd never know. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. She was 24, though her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd lived twice that long. Her dark hair, pulled back in a ponytail that had started neat at 6 a.m., but now sprouted rebellious strands around her face, caught the flickering light from the neon sign that buzzed intermittently above the counter. Rosie's Diner. The apostrophe had burned out 3 years ago, and no one had bothered to fix it. Maya often wondered if there had ever been a real Rosie, or if the name was just another beautiful lie this world liked to tell. "Coffee, hon?" she asked the truck driver in booth 7, her voice carrying that practiced warmth that didn't quite reach the exhaustion in her bones. He grunted affirmatively, and she poured, watching the dark liquid fill his cup with the kind of attention that comes from doing something so many times it becomes meditation. Outside, the November evening had surrendered to night hours ago. It was nearly 9 p.m. on a Thursday, and the dinner rush, if you could call the trickle of regulars a rush, had thinned to just a handful of souls seeking refuge from the cold. Maya glanced at the clock, its red hands stuck at 3:47 for the past 6 months, though everyone knew the real time. Funny how you could get used to broken things, she thought. How you could navigate an entire life around what didn't work. The door chimed, and a gust of wind carried in the scent of wet asphalt and autumn's decay. Maya turned, expecting old Joe who came every Thursday for pie, or maybe the Henderson kid looking for his usual burger. Instead, a man stepped through, and everything about him seemed wrong for this place. He wore a coat that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with water beating off it like it had been engineered to repel the very concept of weather. Beneath it, a suit that spoke of boardrooms and private jets. His shoes, Italian leather, clicked against the floor with an authority that made every sound in the diner seem to quiet and listen. He was in his late 50s, with silver threading through dark hair, a jawline that suggested both strength and sorrow, and eyes that scanned the room with an intensity that made Maya's stomach tighten. "Sit anywhere you like," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Men like this didn't wander into Rosie's Diner. Men like this had people who brought food to them on silver platters. He chose the corner booth, the one beneath the photograph that had hung there since Maya started working here 5 years ago. It showed the diner in its glory days, 1962, according to the faded inscription, when the chrome had gleamed and the dreams had been fresh. The man didn't seem to notice the cracked vinyl or the way the table wobbled unless you put a folded napkin under the left leg. He simply sat, removing his coat with careful precision, and placed it on the seat beside him. Maya approached with her order pad, but before she could launch into her usual greeting, she saw it. Hanging from his neck on a thin gold chain, resting against his crisp white shirt, was a locket. It was old, antique even, with an intricate pattern of vines and roses etched into brass that had been polished so many times the details had softened. But it wasn't the craftsmanship that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. It wasn't the way the light hit it or its obvious value. It was the fact that she knew that locket. She knew the tiny dent on the bottom left corner where it had been dropped on a kitchen floor. She knew that if you opened it, the hinge would squeak in a specific way, high-pitched, almost like a mouse. She knew these things the way you know the sound of your own heartbeat, the rhythm of your own breathing, because she had seen that locket every day for the first 7 years of her life. The order pad slipped from her fingers, clattering against the table. The man looked up, startled, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern as he saw her face. Maya couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The diner had gone silent in her ears, all the ambient noise, the hiss of the grill, the murmur of conversation, the endless rain, fading to nothing. "That's my dad's," she whispered, the words escaping before thought could catch them. That locket. That's my dad's. The man's face drained of color. His hand went to the locket instinctively, protectively, fingers curling around the brass as if to shield it from her gaze. I'm sorry, what did you say? Maya's voice came stronger now, though it trembled at the edges. That locket. Where did you get it? The diner had indeed gone quiet now. Sal, the cook, had stopped his grilling. The truck driver in booth 7 had paused with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. The man stood slowly, as if moving through water. He was tall, easily 6'2", and up close Maya could see the fine lines around his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly as he reached for the locket's clasp. How do you? He stopped, started again. How could you possibly know this locket? My father, Maya said, her voice barely audible now. My father wore that every single day. I play with it when he held me. I remember the pattern, the dent, everything. She stopped, the words tangling in her throat. He disappeared 17 years ago. I was 7. They never found him, never found anything. The man's face had gone from pale to ashen. His fingers fumbled with the locket's clasp, once, twice, before it finally opened. He stared at whatever was inside for a long moment, so long that Maya wanted to scream, wanted to tear it from his hands and see for herself. When he finally turned it toward her, the world tilted on its axis. Inside the locket were 2 photographs, their colors faded but still clear. On the left, a young woman with Maya's eyes and Maya's smile, wearing a yellow dress and laughing at the camera with the kind of joy that seemed to belong to another universe. On the right, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with dark pigtails and a gap-toothed grin, holding a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Maya's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the table, her vision swimming. That's my mother, she breathed. That's me. The man made a sound that might have been a sob or a gasp or both. The locket fell from his trembling fingers, swinging on its chain, catching the light as it spun. Your father, he managed. Your father's name. Tell me your father's name. James, Maya said. The name she hadn't spoken aloud in years feeling strange on her tongue. James Reeves. And then the man did something that would replay in Maya's memory for the rest of her life. This imposing figure in his expensive suit, this person who commanded attention simply by existing, crumpled. His legs gave way and he sank into the booth, his head falling into his hands, and he began to weep. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a man trying to maintain composure, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire frame. I'm so sorry, he gasped between breaths. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. James never told me he had a daughter. He never said. Maya stood frozen, her mind racing through possibilities, through impossibilities, through 17 years of unanswered questions that were suddenly, terrifyingly close to being answered. Around them, the diner remained silent. Sal had come out from behind the kitchen, his spatula still in hand, staring with wide eyes. Carla, the other waitress working tonight, had pressed herself against the far wall, one hand over her mouth. Who are you? Maya asked, her voice steady now with a kind of desperate calm. How did you know my father? The man looked up, his face wet with tears, his composure shattered into 1,000 pieces. When he spoke, his voice was rough, broken. My name is Marcus Henley, and your father, James? He saved my life. He gave me everything I have, everything I am, and I let him down in the worst way possible. The name registered slowly. Marcus Henley. Even in this forgotten corner of the city, even in a place where people counted quarters for coffee, that name meant something. Marcus Henley, founder and CEO of Henley Technologies. Marcus Henley, whose face appeared on magazine covers and business news programs. Marcus Henley, whose estimated worth was somewhere north of $3 billion. Maya sank into the booth across from him, her legs no longer able to support her weight. I don't understand. Marcus reached for the locket with shaking hands, closing it carefully, reverently. 25 years ago, I was nobody. Worse than nobody, I was a junkie living on the streets of Chicago, convinced I was going to die in some alley and that would be that. And then I met James. He paused, his thumb running over the Locket's surface. He was working 3 jobs back then, trying to support you and your mother. One of those jobs was night security at a warehouse where I'd broken in, looking for anything to steal and sell. He found me unconscious, overdosing behind a dumpster. The rain had started again, harder now, drumming against the roof like an audience demanding an encore. He could have called the cops, Marcus continued, his words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken. Should have called the cops. Instead, he got me to a hospital, paid for it out of his own pocket. Money he didn't have. And when I got out, when I was clean enough to think straight, he was there. He gave me a place to stay, helped me get into a program, got me a job at the warehouse. For 2 years, he was everything. My brother, my father, my best friend. The only person who believed I could be something other than what I was. Maya's hands had gone numb. She clasped them together under the table, trying to anchor herself to something real. He never mentioned you. I don't remember. You wouldn't, Marcus said softly. I left Chicago in 1998. I gotten clean, saved some money, had an idea for a startup. James gave me what little he could spare. $3,000 he'd been saving for a down payment on a house. He said he believed in me. Marcus's voice cracked. Said he knew I'd do something important. And you did? Maya whispered, the pieces starting to form a picture she didn't want to see. I did, Marcus agreed, and the words tasted like ashes. The company took off faster than anyone expected. Within 5 years, I was a millionaire. Within 10, I was featured in Forbes. And James. He stopped, his jaw working. James sent me letters, called a few times. He was so proud. Never asked for anything. Just wanted to know how I was doing. And I was busy. Always busy. Important meetings, important deals. I sent him money once, a check for $50,000. He sent it back. Said he didn't need charity from friends. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Still stuck at 3:47. Still lying about time's passage. The last time I spoke to him was November 2008, Marcus said. The date clearly branded into his memory. He called to congratulate me on some award I'd won. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. I told him I'd come visit soon. I never did. And then, he swallowed hard. Then he was gone. Maya felt tears sliding down her own cheeks now. He left for work one morning and never came home. Mom called everyone, filed police reports, put up flyers. They investigated for months. No trace, no body, no explanation. Just gone. I didn't know, Marcus said, and the anguish in his voice was so raw it hurt to hear. I didn't know for 3 years. I was in Dubai closing a deal, and I happened to call his old number just to, reconnect. Your mother answered. She told me everything. By then, the investigation had gone cold. By then, you'd both moved away, trying to start over. And the locket? Maya asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Marcus's hand went to it again, protective, possessive. Your mother sent it to me, along with a letter. She said James had always wanted me to have something to remember him by, and this was the most precious thing he owned. She said the pictures inside were of the 2 people he loved more than life itself. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. She said he'd want me to keep fighting, to keep building, to make something of the second chance he gave me. The weight of 17 years pressed down on the booth, heavy as stone. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the rain-streaked windows, illuminating dust motes that hung in the air like tiny, suspended worlds. I tried to help her, Marcus continued. Your mother. I sent money, offered to set up a trust for you to pay for everything. She refused, said the same thing James had said. She didn't need charity. She just wanted her husband back, and I couldn't give her that. He looked at Maya directly now, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. I failed him. I got everything. The success, the money, the life he helped me build, and I couldn't save him, couldn't find him. Couldn't even be there when he needed me. Maya's mind was spinning, trying to reconcile this story with the fragments she'd carried for 17 years. Her father, the quiet man who worked too much and smiled too little, but who made Funday mornings magical with pancakes and terrible jokes. Her father, who'd given his last dollars to save a stranger. Her father, who'd disappeared into nothing, leaving behind only questions and this locket that had somehow found its way back. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. "In this diner, in this city. Why tonight?" Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands, pulled up a calendar. November 14th, 17 years ago today. I come back every year on this date. I visit the neighborhood where he lived, where he vanished. I don't know what I'm looking for. Closure, maybe. Forgiveness. He laughed bitterly. I eat at every diner, every restaurant in a 10-block radius. I look at faces, wondering if somehow. "You think he's still alive," Maya said, and it wasn't a question. "I don't know what I think," Marcus admitted. "The rational part of me knows the statistics, knows that after 17 years. But James wasn't the kind of man who just disappeared. He wouldn't have left you and your mother voluntarily. Something happened. Something we don't understand." Sal approached then, moving carefully, like he was approaching something wild and unpredictable. "Maya, honey, you okay? You need me to call someone?" Maya shook her head, unable to look away from Marcus. "No. I don't know what I am." Marcus straightened, some of his composure returning, though his eyes remained haunted. "I'm sorry. I've dumped all of this on you, a stranger. You're working, you have your life, and I've just... a stranger." Maya's laugh was sharp, broken. "You're wearing my father's locket. You knew him better than I did, apparently. You have answers I've been searching for my entire adult life." She leaned forward, her voice intense. "You don't get to apologize and walk away. Not now. Not after this." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Maya said simply. "Every story, every memory, every single thing you remember about James Reeves." Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the collision of past and present happening in booth 12 of a forgotten diner. The rain continued its percussion, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed its lonely song. But in this moment, in this bubble of fluorescent light and vinyl and coffee-stained memories, Maya Reeves and Marcus Henley sat across from each other, separated by a table and 17 years of silence, connected by a man who existed now only in memory and the photographs locked inside a brass locket that refused to let him be forgotten. Maya glanced at the clock, still stuck at 3:47, and thought about how appropriate it was, because time had stopped for her at 7 years old, the morning her father walked out the door and into oblivion. Maybe, just maybe, it was finally ready to start moving again. "Tell me," she said, her voice steady with a determination that surprised her. "Tell me everything, and don't leave anything out." Marcus nodded, his hand still on the locket, and began to speak. And as the words flowed, stories of kindness and sacrifice, of a man who saved lives without fanfare and disappeared without explanation. The diner around them seemed to fade, and the past came rushing back with all the force of a river breaking through a dam. Maya's alarm went off at 4:47 a.m., the same time it had every morning for the past 5 years. She reached out from under covers that had worn thin at the edges, fumbling for her phone on the milk crate that served as a nightstand, and silenced the insistent beeping. The apartment was dark, cold enough that she could see her breath in the gray pre-dawn light filtering through curtains she'd sewn herself from clearance fabric. She lay there for 30 seconds, her daily luxury, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of some country she'd never visit. Then she swung her legs out of bed, her feet finding the worn slippers she'd positioned precisely the night before, and began the routine that defined her existence. 5 minutes in the bathroom, washing her face with cold water because the hot water heater was broken and the landlord kept promising to fix it next week. 3 minutes to dress in the spare uniform she kept clean and pressed, hanging on the back of her bedroom door. 2 minutes to check on Mrs. Chun next door, the elderly woman who lived alone and sometimes forgot to take her medications. Maya had found her once, collapsed in her kitchen, and now she checked every morning before her shift. "I'm fine, dear," Mrs. Chun would say through the thin walls, her voice carrying that particular mix of gratitude and annoyance that came from being cared for when you'd spent your whole life caring for others. By 5:23 a.m., Maya was walking the 6 blocks to Rosie's diner through streets that smelled of garbage trucks and yesterday's rain. She passed the corner where Mr. Washington sold flowers from buckets, though at this hour he was just a shadow setting up his wares. She passed the bodega with the bulletproof glass where she bought her groceries, calculating each purchase down to the penny. She passed the elementary school where she'd once been a student, back when her biggest worry was remembering to bring her homework. The diner was always dark when she arrived, and she had the key that Sal had trusted her with after her first year. She'd flip the switches in a specific order. Lights first, then the open sign that flickered and buzzed, then the coffee machines that would hiss and gurgle to life like awakening dragons. By 5:45, the first pot of coffee would be ready, and by 6, the early risers would start trickling in. She knew them all by name, by order, by the small griefs they carried into the morning light. Harold, who'd lost his wife to cancer and couldn't bear to make breakfast alone. Denise, who worked 2 jobs and grabbed coffee between shifts, her eyes always carrying that particular exhaustion that came from never quite catching up. Tommy, who was 16 and should have been in school but was working construction to help his mother make rent. Each of them had a story, and Maya had learned to hold those stories gently, to pour coffee with compassion, to remember that sometimes a smile and a warm cup were the only kindness someone received all day. But that was before last Thursday night, before Marcus Henley, before the locket that had turned her world inside out. Now, 5 days later, Maya went through the same motions, but everything felt different. She poured Harold's coffee and wondered if her father had been like this after her mother died, going through routines because stopping would mean falling apart. She took Tommy's order and thought about how her father had worked 3 jobs to support them, sacrificing sleep and health and time for people he loved. She wiped down tables and remembered Marcus's words. He was everything. My brother, my father, my best friend. Who had James Reeves been, really? The man she remembered was assembled from fragments. The scratch of his stubble when he kissed her goodnight, the way he hummed off-key while making breakfast, the particular scent of his cologne mixed with motor oil from whatever job he'd been working. But those were a 7-year-old's memories, distorted by time and trauma and the desperate need to hold onto something that had been taken. Marcus had called 3 times since that night. Maya had let the first 2 calls go to voicemail, unable to face the conversation, unsure what she even wanted to know. The 3rd time, she'd answered. "I've hired investigators," he'd said without preamble, his voice carrying the decisive tone of a man used to making things happen. "The best in the country. I should have done this years ago, but I'm doing it now. They're going to go through everything, police reports, witness statements, security footage if any still exists. Someone knows something. Someone always knows something." Maya had stood in her tiny apartment, phone pressed to her ear, and felt something she hadn't felt in 17 years. Hope. It was a dangerous feeling, sharp-edged and painful, like swallowing glass. "I don't have money to contribute," she'd said, hating how small her voice sounded. "This isn't about money." Marcus's response had been immediate, almost angry. "Your father gave me my life back. The least I can do is try to give you answers." But answers came with a price. Maya was learning. The not knowing had been a constant ache, but it had become familiar, something she'd learned to carry. Now, with the possibility of knowing, everything felt unstable. What if they found him? What if they found only confirmation of death? What if they found nothing at all and hope died for a second time? Her mother had called yesterday. They hadn't spoken in 3 months. The distance between them grown too wide, filled with too much unprocessed grief. But somehow word had reached her. "Maya." Her mother's voice had sounded older, worn down by the years. "I heard you met Marcus. You sent him Dad's locket." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement. "I did. He loved your father. He deserved something to remember him by." A long pause. "Are you okay?" Maya had laughed at that, a sound without humor. I don't know what okay looks like anymore, Mom. I know the feeling. They'd sat in silence for a full minute, connected by phone lines and shared loss and the memory of a man who'd been the center of both their worlds. Finally, her mother had spoken again. Don't let this consume you, baby. I did that. I spent years searching, hoping, destroying myself piece by piece. And it didn't bring him back. It just made me lose more. I lost myself and eventually, I lost you too. You didn't lose me, Maya had protested. But the words felt hollow. When was the last time they'd had a real conversation? When was the last time they'd been in the same room? I live in Oregon now, her mother said softly. Did you know that? I moved 6 years ago. Remarried. His name is Tom and he's kind and he doesn't ask questions about the past. And every single day, I feel like I'm betraying your father just by being alive and okay. Maya had started crying then. Silent tears that rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto her worn carpet. I work in a diner, Mom. I pour coffee and wipe tables and live in a 400-square-foot apartment with a broken heater. And I tell myself I'm okay, that this is enough. But the truth is I'm just stuck. I've been stuck since I was 7 years old. Then maybe this is your chance to get unstuck, her mother said. Maybe Marcus showing up is the universe giving you permission to move forward. But moving forward required knowing which direction to go, and Maya had spent so long treading water that she'd forgotten how to swim. Work continued, relentless and familiar. Breakfast rush bled into lunch. The regulars came and went. Sal burned the hash browns and swore in Greek. Carla complained about her boyfriend who wouldn't propose after 7 years. The coffee machine made sounds like it was preparing to die. Life, in all its mundane glory, kept happening. During her break, Maya sat in the storage room on an overturned bucket and allowed herself to think about her father. Really think about him, not just the sanitized memory she'd constructed over the years. He'd been 31 when he disappeared. Younger than Maya was now. He'd dropped out of high school to support his sick mother, worked construction and warehouse jobs, married young. By all accounts, he shouldn't have had time to save a stranger, shouldn't have had $3,000 to give away, shouldn't have been the kind of person who changed lives with quiet acts of grace. But he had been, and then he'd vanished. The theories had been endless in those first months. Foul play, accident, voluntary disappearance. The police had investigated, found nothing suspicious. No large withdrawals from bank accounts, no secret second life, no history of depression or mental illness. James Reeves had simply walked out the door on a Tuesday morning to go to work and had never arrived. Maya pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in years. She Googled her father's name. Most of the results were old news articles from 2008, their language clinical and detached. Local man missing. Search continues for warehouse worker. Police seek information. One article included a photo, her father in his security uniform, smiling at the camera with the kind of expression that suggested he'd been told to smile and was doing his best to comply. Maya studied that face, looking for herself in the features, finding her nose, her chin, the shape of her eyes. There was a Reddit thread from 2 years ago she discovered in a forum dedicated to unsolved disappearances. Someone had posted about James Reeves, and strangers had speculated. Some thought he'd been murdered, body disposed of. Others suggested witness protection or voluntary disappearance from debt. One person had written, "Sometimes people just slip through the cracks. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong set of circumstances, and the universe swallows them whole." Maya closed the browser, feeling sick. "You okay, hon?" Carla poked her head into the storage room. Her blonde hair frizzed from the humidity of the kitchen. "You've been back here for 20 minutes. Just tired," Maya lied, standing and brushing off her uniform. "You've been off all week." Carla stepped fully into the room, her expression concerned. "Look, I know it's not my business, but that guy who came in last Thursday, the one who made you cry, are you in some kind of trouble? Because Sal knows people. And if you need help," the casual offer of violence made Maya laugh despite everything. "No, nothing like that. He knew my father. The one who disappeared when I was a kid." "Oh," Carla's expression shifted to understanding. Oh, honey, that's heavy. Yeah. Maya pulled her hair back into a fresh ponytail, checked her reflection in the stainless steel shelf. She looked tired. She looked every one of her 24 years and then some. It's a lot. You need time off? I can cover your shifts. No. The word came out too fast, too desperate. No, I need the work. I need normal. Whatever that is. Carla studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but you know where I am if you need to talk. Or drink. Or both. The afternoon brought a lull, that quiet period between lunch and dinner when the diner held its breath. Maya used the time to prep for the evening rush, refilling salt shakers, checking ketchup bottles, rolling silverware into napkins. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over while her mind wandered. She thought about Marcus Henley's office, which she imagined as all glass and steel, perched high above a city where people made fortunes and broke them before lunch. She thought about the investigators he'd hired, imagined them poring over files, making calls, following trails that had gone cold 17 years ago. What could they possibly find that the police hadn't? But the police had been overworked and underfunded, dealing with dozens of cases at once. Marcus's investigators would have unlimited resources, connections, the ability to push doors that had stayed closed before. Maybe that made a difference. Maybe it didn't. Order up. Sal's voice cut through her thoughts, and Maya grabbed the plates. Meatloaf special for table 4, grilled cheese and tomato soup for the kid in booth 2. She delivered the food with automatic smiles, automatic small talk, her mind only half present. The kid in booth 2 was maybe 8 years old, sitting with his mother who looked exhausted in that particular way that suggested single parenthood and too many jobs. The boy was coloring on his paper placemat, tongue stuck out in concentration. What are you drawing? Maya asked, crouching down to his level. Robots, he said seriously, showing her a picture that was mostly scribbles and enthusiasm. This one is the good robot, and this one is the bad robot, and they're fighting. Who's winning? He considered this carefully. The good one. The good one always wins. Maya felt something crack in her chest. That's nice, she managed. That's a really nice way to see the world. As she walked away, she heard the mother say, What do we say, Tyler? Thank you, miss. Such small moments, Maya thought. Such tiny acts of normalcy in a world that kept spinning regardless of personal tragedy. That kid would grow up, would probably forget this meal, this drawing, this interaction. But maybe someday he'd remember the waitress who asked about his robots, and maybe that would matter in some small way. Her shift ended at 9 p.m., 12 hours after it began. She counted her tips in the back room, $73.47, and divided it mentally into categories. Rent, food, electric bill, the hole in her left shoe that needed fixing, the perpetual state of not quite enough that defined her life. Marcus had mentioned money that first night, had offered in his careful way to help. Maya had refused instinctively, hearing her mother's words, her father's principles. But pride was expensive, she was learning. Pride didn't keep you warm when the heater was broken. Pride didn't fill the empty spaces. The walk home was cold, the November wind cutting through her jacket that had been purchased at Goodwill 3 years ago. She passed Mr. Washington closing up his flower stand. His remaining inventory wilted but still hopeful. Night, Maya, he called out, his voice carrying that particular rasp of a lifelong smoker. Night, Mr. W. She passed the bodega, already closed, its metal gate pulled down. She passed the elementary school, dark and silent, holding the ghosts of 1,000 childhoods. She passed lives being lived in lit windows, families eating dinner, watching television, existing in their small, contained worlds. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it, cold, quiet, waiting. She turned on the single overhead light, dropped her bag on the counter that separated her kitchen from her living room, and stood in the middle of the space, suddenly unable to remember why she'd been in such a hurry to get here. This was her life. This 400-square-foot box with its water-stained ceiling and broken heater and thrift store furniture. This cycle of wake, work, sleep, repeat. This careful management of dollars and days, this endless stretching of not enough to cover too much. When had she stopped dreaming? She used to want things, used to plan. Before her father disappeared, she'd wanted to be a veterinarian. Loved animals with that fierce, uncomplicated love that children have. After he vanished, she'd wanted to be a detective, someone who found the missing, brought them home. But wanting required hope, and hope required energy, and she'd used all of hers just surviving. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. The investigators want to talk to you. Wednesday, if you're available. I can send a car. Maya stared at the message for a long time. Wednesday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare herself to revisit the worst period of her life, to dredge up memories she'd worked so hard to bury, to hope against hope that 17 years of silence might finally speak. She typed back, I work until 3, can do it after. The response was immediate. I'll make it work. Thank you, Maya. She set the phone down and walked to the single window in her bedroom. Outside, the city glittered with lives being lived, with possibilities and disappointments, with all the messy glory of existence. Somewhere out there, her father had disappeared. Somewhere out there, answers might exist. Maya pressed her forehead against the cold glass and allowed herself to want something. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remember what that felt like. She wanted to know. Wanted to understand. Wanted, with a fierceness that surprised her, to find out who James Reeves had been beyond the fragments she'd carried. Wanted to know if he'd suffered, if he'd thought of her, if his last moments had been peaceful or terrified or somewhere in between. And underneath all of that, buried so deep she could barely acknowledge it, she wanted her father back. Wanted the impossible, the miraculous, the thing that her rational mind knew couldn't happen but her heart refused to stop hoping for. The good robot always wins, the kid had said. The good one always wins. If only the world worked that way. Wednesday arrived with the particular weight that comes from anticipating something you're not sure you're ready for. Maya had requested the afternoon off, the first time she'd done so in 18 months, and Sal had granted it with surprising gentleness, his gruff exterior cracking just enough to let concern show through. You take all the time you need, he'd said, flipping burgers with more force than necessary. Carla can cover. You got important things to deal with. The car Marcus sent wasn't what Maya expected. She'd imagined something ostentatious. A limousine with tinted windows that would announce wealth and privilege to the entire neighborhood. Instead, a simple black sedan pulled up at 3:15 p.m., driven by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Miss Reeves? I'm Janet. Mr. Henley asked me to drive you to his office. Maya slid into the back seat, her second-hand purse feeling suddenly shabby against the leather interior. The car smelled like new things, clean things, expensive things. She kept her hands folded in her lap, afraid to touch anything. The drive took 40 minutes, cutting through the city from her neighborhood, where buildings leaned wearily against each other and graffiti told stories in spray paint, to the financial district, where towers of glass and steel reached toward the sky with architectural arrogance. Janet made gentle small talk about the weather, the traffic, carefully avoiding any mention of why Maya was being driven to meet one of the wealthiest men in the country. Henley Technologies occupied floors 30 through 45 of a building that seemed designed to intimidate. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a ceiling that soared 3 stories high and a fountain that probably cost more than Maya would make in her lifetime. Security guards in crisp uniforms monitored everyone who entered, their eyes tracking movement with professional precision. Janet led her to a private elevator, one that required a key card to access. Mr. Henley's office is on the 43rd floor, she explained, swiping the card. The investigators are already there. The elevator rose so smoothly Maya almost didn't feel the movement. Her ears popped as they climbed, and she watched the numbers tick upward. 10, 20, 30, 40. Each floor representing lives she couldn't imagine, decisions that affected thousands, money that moved in amounts she couldn't comprehend. The doors opened onto a reception area that was all clean lines and muted colors. A young man sat behind a desk made of what looked like a single piece of dark wood. His suit probably worth more than Maya's monthly rent. Miss Reeves, he said, standing immediately. Mr. Henley is expecting you. Please follow me. They walked down a hallway lined with photographs. Marcus shaking hands with presidents, cutting ribbons at hospital openings, accepting awards from organizations Maya had never heard of. In each photo, he wore the same expression. Polite, professional, and somehow distant, as if part of him existed somewhere else entirely. The conference room was enormous, with windows that offered a view of the entire city spread out below like a circuit board of lights and lives. A table that could seat 20 dominated the space, but only 4 people were present. Marcus, standing by the window with his back to the door, and 3 others seated around one end of the table. Maya! Marcus turned, and the relief in his voice was palpable. Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy. He looked different than he had at the diner, more composed but also more tired. The suit was impeccable, but there were shadows under his eyes that suggested sleep had been elusive. The locket still hung around his neck, visible above his shirt collar. Please sit. He gestured to the chair at the head of the table, a position of prominence that made Maya deeply uncomfortable. These are the investigators I mentioned. Claire Rodriguez, formerly FBI. He indicated a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Thomas Park, private investigator with 30 years of experience. A Korean-American man who looked like he could be anyone's friendly uncle. And Dr. Sarah Winters, forensic psychologist. The third woman was younger, maybe early 30s, with red hair and an expression that was both professional and compassionate. Maya sat, her hands gripping the armrests. You said you wanted to talk to me. Claire leaned forward, opening a tablet in front of her. Miss Reeves, I want to start by saying that everything we discuss here is confidential. Our only goal is to find out what happened to your father. To do that, we need to understand him as a person, and you're one of the few people still alive who knew him. The words "still alive" hit harder than they should have. I was 7 when he disappeared, Maya said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. I don't know how much help I can be. You'd be surprised. Dr. Winters smiled gently. Children often remember details that adults miss. Emotions, patterns, small inconsistencies. We're not looking for you to solve the mystery. We're just trying to build a complete picture. Thomas opened a folder, sliding several photographs across the table. These are from the original police investigation. Have you seen them before? Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Maya looked down at images she tried to forget. Her father's work ID, showing him in his security uniform. The last photograph ever taken of him, at a company picnic 3 months before he vanished. A scan of his time card from the warehouse where he worked, showing he'd clocked in at 6 a.m. on November 14, 2008, but never clocked out. My mother showed me some of these, Maya said, her throat tight. Years ago. Let's start with the basics, Claire said, her voice methodical. Your father worked 3 jobs in November 2008. Day shift security at Meridian Warehouse, evening shift at a grocery store, and weekend maintenance at an apartment complex. Is that correct? Yes. When was the last time you saw him? Maya closed her eyes, pulling up the memory she'd replayed 1,000 times. The night before he disappeared, November 13th. He came home around 10 p.m. after his grocery store shift. I was supposed to be asleep, but I'd waited up. He tucked me in, told me a story about a princess who saved herself. He smelled like floor wax and those mints he always chewed. She opened her eyes, found them wet. He kissed my forehead and said, "Dream big, Maya Bird." That was his nickname for me. Maya Bird. Marcus made a sound, quickly suppressed. When Maya looked at him, his hand was pressed against his mouth, his eyes bright with unshed tears. And the next morning? Thomas prompted gently. I didn't see him. He left before I woke up. His shift at the warehouse started at 6. Mom said he'd kissed us both goodbye while we were sleeping. That was the last time anyone in my family saw him. Claire made notes on her tablet. According to the police report, your father's car was found 3 days later, parked in the warehouse lot. Keys in the ignition, wallet on the seat, no signs of struggle. The warehouse security footage showed him arriving at 5:47 a.m., parking, and walking toward the building. He never made it inside. What do you mean? Maya asked. Where did he go? That's what we're trying to determine. Claire pulled up a grainy video on her tablet, turning it so Maya could see. This is the last known footage of your father. The video was time-stamped 5:48 a.m., November 14, 2008. It showed a parking lot in the gray pre-dawn light and a figure walking across it. Her father, unmistakable even in the poor quality footage. He was wearing his security uniform, carrying the lunchbox her mother had packed the night before. He walked with purpose toward the building, then paused. Maya leaned forward, her heart hammering. What did he see? We don't know. The angle doesn't show what caught his attention. But watch. Claire pointed as the figure on screen turned, looking toward something off camera. He stood there for perhaps 10 seconds, then walked out of frame, moving away from the warehouse entrance. And he never came back, Maya whispered. Never. Thomas pulled out more documents. The police interviewed everyone who worked at the warehouse that day. No one saw him after this footage. No one heard from him. His phone went straight to voicemail when your mother tried to call. His bank account was never accessed again. It's as if he walked into a void. Dr. Winters spoke up, her voice gentle. Maya, I need to ask you some difficult questions about your father's mental state in the weeks before he disappeared. Did he seem depressed? Anxious? Different in any way? No. The answer was immediate, certain. He was tired. He was always tired because of the jobs. But he wasn't sad. We were planning my birthday party. He'd been saving up to buy me a bike. He had plans. People who plan to disappear don't make plans for the future. What about your mother? How was their relationship? Maya bristled at the implication. They loved each other. They fought sometimes about money, about him working too much, but it was normal married people stuff. Mom would tell him he needed to sleep more, and he'd tell her to stop worrying. She was pregnant. The room went very still. Pregnant? Claire's voice was sharp. That's not in any of the reports. She lost the baby 2 months after Dad disappeared. The stress. Maya's voice broke. She was 3 months along. They hadn't told anyone yet except me. It was supposed to be a surprise for Christmas. Marcus stood abruptly, walking to the window, his shoulders rigid. Maya could see his reflection in the glass, could see him struggling with some emotion too large to contain. I'm sorry, Dr. Winters said softly. I know this is painful, but these details matter. They help us understand what your father would and wouldn't have done. Thomas pulled out another document. The police investigated several theories. Voluntary disappearance was ruled unlikely due to lack of preparation or financial movement. Foul play was considered, but there was no evidence. No blood, no witnesses, no body. Accident was possible, but the area was thoroughly searched. That leaves us with very few options. Unless we consider options that weren't available in 2008, Claire said, tapping her tablet. Facial recognition technology, cell phone tower data analysis, digital footprint tracking. We have tools now that didn't exist 17 years ago. But you need something to analyze, Maya said, understanding dawning. You need leads. And you don't have any. Not yet, Thomas agreed. Which is why we're going back to the beginning. We're re-interviewing everyone who knew your father. We're looking at cold cases from that time period to see if there are any patterns. We're examining unsolved homicides, unidentified remains, missing persons who might have crossed paths with him. We've also hired a team to search databases of unidentified individuals, Claire added. Jean does who were found in the years following his disappearance. Hospitals with unidentified patients. It's a long shot, but he could have had an accident and lost his memory, Maya finished, the hope in her voice painful to hear even to herself. He could be alive somewhere, not knowing who he is. The look that passed between the three investigators told Maya everything she needed to know about how likely they thought that scenario was. But they were kind enough not to say it. We're exploring every possibility, Dr. Winters said. Mr. Henley has given us unlimited resources and time. If there are answers to be found, we'll find them. Marcus turned from the window, his composure somewhat restored. I've also reached out to the media. Several true crime podcasts have expressed interest in covering your father's case. A cold case documentary series wants to feature it. The more attention we bring to this, the more likely it is that someone who knows something will come forward. Maya felt simultaneously grateful and violated. Her father's disappearance, her family's tragedy, about to become entertainment for people eating their lunch, background noise for their commutes. But if it helped, whatever it takes, she said. There's one more thing. Thomas pulled out a worn notebook, its pages yellowed with age. This was in your father's locker at the warehouse. The police cataloged it but didn't think it was relevant to his disappearance. It's just a journal where he kept track of his shifts, his expenses. But I found something interesting. He opened to a page marked with a sticky note. Maya could see her father's handwriting, neat, precise. The same hand that had written her notes for her school lunchbox. The entry was dated November 10, 2008, 4 days before he disappeared. Man outside warehouse again. Third time this week. Blue jacket, maybe 40s. Watching entrance. Ask security about him, no one else has noticed. Probably nothing, but something feels off. Made note of license plate. BKL 4829. The room was silent. Did the police follow up on this? Maya demanded, her voice rising. According to the case file, they ran the plate. It came back to a rental car that had been returned weeks before your father disappeared. Dead end. Claire's expression was grim. But we're not the police. We have different resources. We tracked down the rental company's records, Thomas said. They've since gone out of business, but we found archived files. The car was rented by a man named David Marsh, paid for with a prepaid credit card. We're still trying to track down who David Marsh actually was. It's likely an alias. Someone was watching him, Maya said, her mind racing. Someone was watching my father, and 4 days later he disappeared. That's not a coincidence. We don't believe in coincidences, Claire agreed. We're digging into this. But Maya, I need you to understand something. This investigation could take months, years even, and we may never find definitive answers. Most missing persons cases remain unsolved. I've waited 17 years, Maya said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I can wait longer if it means finding the truth. Marcus moved then, coming to stand beside her chair. He didn't touch her, respecting her space, but his presence was solid, grounding. You're not waiting alone this time, he said quietly. Whatever this takes, however long it takes, you have support. You have resources. You have people who care about finding answers. Why? The question burst out of Maya before she could stop it. Why do you care so much? You haven't seen my father in 17 years. You're a billionaire with companies to run and your own life to live. Why are you doing this? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand moving to the locket around his neck. Because I owe him everything. Because he saved my life when he had no reason to. Because he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And because, his voice cracked, because I failed him when it mattered most. I was so caught up in my success in building my empire that I forgot about the man who made it all possible. I didn't call enough, didn't visit, didn't stay in touch the way I should have. And then he was gone, and I never got to tell him thank you. Never got to tell him that every success I've had, every good thing in my life, exists because he chose to help a stranger who didn't deserve it. He looked at Maya directly, and she saw the raw guilt in his eyes. I can't bring him back, but I can do this. I can use every resource I have, every connection, every dollar to try to give you what I never got, closure, understanding, maybe, if we're very lucky, justice. Maya stood, her legs unsteady. She looked at this man who had become impossibly wealthy, who commanded respect and attention, who could make things happen with a phone call. And she saw what he really was. Another person broken by her father's absence, Another life touched by James Reeves's quiet kindness. "Okay," she said. "Where do we start?" The meeting continued for another 2 hours. The investigators laid out their strategy. Re-interviewing witnesses, using modern technology to analyze old evidence, putting pressure on cold case departments to reopen the investigation. They showed Maya timelines, maps, theories. They asked about her father's friends, his habits, his fears. And slowly, painfully, a picture emerged of a man more complex than Maya had known. James Reeves, who worked himself to exhaustion to provide for his family. Who saved strangers and gave away money he couldn't afford to lose. Who noticed things others missed, like men in blue jackets watching warehouse entrances. Who kept meticulous notes and made plans for futures he would never see. Did he have enemies? Claire asked at one point. Maya laughed bitterly. He was a security guard and a grocery store clerk. Who has enemies in jobs like that? You'd be surprised, Thomas said. People get fired and hold grudges. Money goes missing and someone gets blamed. Arguments escalate. We're looking into anyone he might have had conflicts with at work. He mentioned someone once. Maya said slowly, the memory surfacing. I was listening to him talk to Mom one night, maybe a week before he disappeared. He said something about a guy at the warehouse who gave him bad vibes. Someone who was asking too many questions about security protocols. Mom told him to report it and Dad said he would, but he wanted to be sure first. He didn't want to get someone in trouble over a feeling. Claire and Thomas exchanged glances. That's not in the police report, Claire said. I was 7. No one asked me what I overheard. The investigators made notes, adding this to their growing file. Each detail, each memory, another piece in a puzzle that might never be complete. By the time the meeting ended, it was after 7 p.m. Maya felt hollowed out, wrung dry from reliving memories and facing possibilities. Marcus walked her to the elevator, Janet already waiting with the car to take her home. Thank you, he said again. I know this was difficult. It's not over, though, is it? Maya looked up at him. This is just the beginning. Yes. He didn't sugarcoat it. And it's going to get harder before it gets better. Once the media picks up the story, there will be attention. Theories. People who claim to have information but are just looking for their 15 minutes of fame. You need to be prepared for that. Maya thought about her quiet life, her anonymous existence pouring coffee and wiping tables. That life was about to end. I don't have a choice. Not if I want answers. You always have a choice, Marcus said gently. You can walk away from this right now, and I'll continue the investigation without involving you. You can go back to your life and wait for us to contact you if we find anything definitive. It was tempting. So tempting to retreat into safety, into the known rhythms of her existence. But Maya thought about the kid in the diner with his robot drawings, about how the good one always wins. She thought about her father walking across a parking lot and into oblivion. She thought about 17 years of questions. No, she said firmly. I'm seeing this through, whatever comes. Marcus smiled, sad and proud at once. Your father would be proud of you. You have his strength. The ride home was quiet. Maya watched the city pass by the window, the gleaming towers giving way to smaller buildings. Then to her neighborhood where lights flickered and hope came in smaller packages. Janet pulled up outside her apartment building, the car looking painfully out of place among the rust and reality. Miss Reeves, Janet said as Maya opened the door. Mr. Henley wanted me to give you this. She handed over an envelope, thick and cream-colored. Maya opened it to find a credit card with her name embossed on it. A note in Marcus's handwriting read, for expenses during the investigation. No arguments. It's the least I can do. She should refuse it. Should hand it back and say she didn't need charity. But pride was expensive, and she was tired of being cold, tired of calculating every purchase, tired of choosing between electricity and eating properly. Thank you, she told Janet, tucking the envelope into her purse. Her apartment felt different when she entered it. Smaller somehow. More temporary, as if the conversation she just had revealed it for what it was. Not a home, but a place to exist while life happened elsewhere. She made tea with the electric kettle that took 15 minutes to boil water, curled up on her thrift store couch, and finally let herself process everything she'd learned. Someone had been watching her father. Someone with a fake name and a rental car. Someone her father had noticed, had written about, had found suspicious. And 4 days later, he'd disappeared. It wasn't random. Couldn't be random. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Claire Rodriguez. I wanted to reach out personally. What you did today took courage. We're gonna find answers, Maya. I promise you that." Another text, this one from Thomas Park. "I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never seen Mr. Henley this committed to a case. Your father must have been an incredible man. We won't let you down." And finally, one from Marcus. "Get some rest. Tomorrow everything changes. But you're not facing it alone." Maya set the phone down and looked around her apartment. At the water-stained ceiling, the second-hand furniture, the life she'd built from the wreckage of her father's disappearance. Tomorrow, he'd said. Tomorrow everything changes. She was ready. At least she thought she was. Section 3 word count. 4,427 words. Running total. 7,674 words. The next morning brought the first wave of what would become a tsunami. Maya was halfway through her shift when Sal called her to the back, his expression strange. "There's reporters outside," he said, "asking about you, about your father." Maya's stomach dropped. "Already? 2 of them with cameras. I told them to get lost, but they're not leaving. They want a statement." She peered through the front window. Sure enough, 2 people with professional cameras and microphones stood on the sidewalk, clearly waiting. One was already doing a piece to camera, gesturing at the diner behind her, where Maya Reeves, daughter of missing person James Reeves, has worked for the past 5 years. Sources say that billionaire Marcus Henley has reopened the investigation into the 2008 disappearance. "How did they find out so fast?" Maya asked. Her phone rang. "Marcus," she answered. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I thought we'd have more time before the media picked it up, but someone at the police department leaked the story. It's already on 3 news sites." Maya felt the walls of her careful, quiet life collapsing inward. "What do I do?" "Don't talk to them. Not yet. We need to control the narrative, and to do that, we need to be strategic. I'm sending someone to help you. A publicist who handles crisis communication. Her name is Amanda Chun, and she's the best in the business." "I don't need a publicist. I'm not famous." "You are now," Marcus said, and there was genuine regret in his voice. "Whether you want to be or not. The story is out. Billionaire searches for friend who saved his life. Daughter works minimum wage while father's disappearance remains unsolved." It's exactly the kind of human interest piece that goes viral. And he was right. By noon, the diner had filled with people who'd never been there before. Some genuinely sympathetic, others clearly hoping to catch a glimpse of Maya, to be part of the story they could tell their friends. Sal had to turn people away at the door. "This is crazy," Carla muttered, refilling coffee for a table of obvious tourists taking photos of the booth where Marcus had sat. "It's like we're a zoo exhibit." Maya retreated to the storage room, her hands shaking. This was what she'd signed up for. She reminded herself. This was the price of answers. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it were 2 very different things. Amanda Chan arrived at 2 p.m., a whirlwind of efficiency in designer clothes and sharp intelligence. She was Chinese-American, probably in her early 40s, with perfect posture and an iPad that seemed to contain her entire universe. "Maya Reeves." She extended a hand. "Amanda Chin, we need to talk strategy." They found a quiet corner, or as quiet as the diner could be with its new population of curiosity seekers. Amanda pulled up various news sites on her iPad, showing Maya what was already circulating. The headlines ranged from sympathetic to sensational. Billionaire's search for missing friend brings hope to forgotten case. Waitress daughter struggles while father's disappearance remains mystery. Marcus Henley. I owe this man everything. The story is spreading fast, Amanda said, her tone matter of fact. You're going to get interview requests from every major outlet. Good Morning America, 60 Minutes, CNN. Plus podcasts, YouTube channels, documentary crews. We need to decide how to handle this. I don't want to be famous, Maya said. I just want to find my father. I understand. But fame is happening whether you want it or not. The question is whether we shape it or let it shape you. Amanda leaned forward. Here's my advice. We do one major interview. Something controlled, sympathetic. We tell your story your way, and then we refer all other media to that interview. It gives you control while satisfying the public's curiosity. What if I say no to everything? Then they tell the story anyway, but without your input. Speculation replaces fact. You become a character in someone else's narrative instead of the author of your own. Maya thought about this, hating every option. What would my father want? I didn't know your father, Amanda said gently. But from what Marcus has told me, he sounds like someone who valued truth and helping others. Telling your story could help. There are thousands of missing persons cases that go cold because people forget because they stop caring. Your story could change that. It was manipulation, Maya knew. Sophisticated, well-intentioned manipulation, but manipulation nonetheless. And yet, Amanda wasn't wrong. One interview, Maya agreed finally. But I choose who and when. Deal. Amanda made notes on her iPad. I'll set up options. In the meantime, no comments to anyone else. If reporters approach you, say, I'm not making statements at this time. Don't elaborate. Don't explain. Just that one sentence. The afternoon deteriorated further. By 3 p.m., there were 5 news vans outside the diner. By 4, someone had posted Maya's address online, and she received a panicked call from Mrs. Chen, saying people were knocking on doors in their building. By 5, #FindJamesReeves was trending on social media, with amateur detectives sharing theories and timelines. Maya read some of the posts during her break, a mistake she immediately regretted. Maybe he witnessed a crime and had to disappear into witness protection. Or he had a secret second family and chose them over his first. Probably just walked away. Some people can't handle responsibility. Plot twist. What if the billionaire had something to do with it? Covering up guilt with a fake investigation. Each theory was another knife wound, another violation. These people didn't know her father, didn't know her family, didn't know anything except what they'd read in a 500-word article. But that didn't stop them from deciding they had the answers. Marcus called again at 6. I saw the trending topic. I'm sorry, Maya. I didn't anticipate it would blow up this fast. It's not your fault. Maya was surprised to find she meant it. You're trying to help. The circus is just a side effect. I want you to take time off from the diner, he said. This is only going to get worse before it gets better. Sal's place is going to be swarmed for weeks. You can't work in those conditions. I need the money. I'll cover your lost wages. Please, Maya. For your safety, if nothing else. She wanted to argue, wanted to cling to the normal routine that had kept her grounded. But Sal himself had pulled her aside an hour ago, suggesting the same thing. This is too much, hon. Come back when things calm down. Fine, she agreed. But I want to do something useful. I can't just sit at home watching this happen. Actually, Marcus said, and she could hear the careful consideration in his voice. There is something you could do. The investigators want to visit the warehouse where your father worked. The building still exists, though it's under different management now. They think walking through his last known location might trigger memories, might help you notice something that seems off. Would you be willing to do that? The thought of standing where her father had stood, walking where he'd walked on his last morning, made Maya's chest tight. But she'd committed to seeing this through. When? Tomorrow morning early, before the media catches wind of it. I'll be there. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. Facebook friend requests from strangers, Instagram followers, messages from people claiming to have known her father, to have seen him, to have information. Most were well-meaning but useless. Some were cruel. A few were bizarre conspiracy theories that would have been funny if they weren't about her actual life. At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and made tea. sitting at her small kitchen table and looking at the envelope Marcus had given her. The credit card sat unused. She hadn't needed it yet, hadn't let herself touch it, but the gesture itself meant something. It meant someone believed she deserved more than constant calculation, more than choosing between heat and food. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Maya Reeves. A man's voice, older, with a southern accent. Yes. My name is Robert Chin. I was a detective with the Chicago PD back in 2008. I worked your father's case. Maya sat up straighter, her heart racing. I remember you. You came to our apartment, asked questions. I did, and I want you to know that case has haunted me for 17 years. We did everything we could with the resources we had, but it was never enough. When I heard that Henley was reopening it, I had to call. He paused. There's something that wasn't in the official reports. Something I couldn't prove, so I couldn't include it. But you should know. What is it? 3 weeks before your father disappeared, we had another case. A warehouse worker, different facility, killed in what looked like a robbery gone wrong. But I never bought it. Too clean, too professional. I think it was a hit made to look random. Maya's mouth went dry. What does that have to do with my father? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The dead man, his name was Terry Lawson, had filed a report with his supervisor 2 months before he died. He said he'd seen people loading unmarked crates into trucks after hours, and when he asked about it, he was told to mind his business. He didn't. He kept nosing around. And then he turned up dead. You think my father saw something similar? I think your father was the kind of man who noticed things, who asked questions, who didn't mind his own business when something seemed wrong. Robert's voice was heavy with regret. And I think that might have gotten him killed. I could never prove it, could never find enough evidence to pursue it. But now, with Henley's resources, with new technology, maybe the truth is finally within reach. Why are you telling me this now? Why not tell the investigators directly? I will. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. Because if I'm right, if your father died because he was a good man trying to do the right thing, you deserve to know that. You deserve to know he was a hero, not a victim of random chance. After they hung up, Maya sat in the darkness of her apartment, Robert Chen's words echoing in her mind. A hero, not a victim. A man who'd seen wrong and tried to right it, even at personal cost. The man she remembered, magnified and clarified. The good robot always wins, the kid had said. But what happened when the good robot fought something too big, too powerful, too ruthless? What happened when being good wasn't enough? 6 months later, the investigators found him. Not alive. The DNA from remains discovered in an industrial canal matched James Reeves. But they found answers too. Security footage, finally unearthed from a defunct storage facility, showed James confronting men loading stolen pharmaceuticals. A witness, emboldened by the media attention, came forward. Maya stood at her father's funeral, a real one this time, with Marcus beside her. The locket hung around her neck now, passed on with ceremony and tears. He died doing what was right, Marcus said quietly. I know, and she did. The not knowing had been the cruelest part. She'd quit the diner, started college on a scholarship Marcus had established in James's name. Not charity, but legacy. Other families of missing persons reached out, found community, found hope. The good robot didn't always win, Maya had learned. But good people kept fighting anyway. And sometimes, after 17 years of silence, the truth finally spoke. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.